You know, I really didn't want to watch this, for obvious reasons. I really didn't want to watch this. But then I thought that this horrible failure could be used as a tool for learning on what not to do. So here we are. We start out with some meta-narration from our titular character Velma, voiced and written by nobody's favorite character from The Office. Let's take a listen.
Normally, origin stories are about tall, handsome guys struggling with the burden of being handed even more power. And if they are about girls, it's usually like, hey, what made this hot chick go crazy?
Right, so do I even need to explain what's wrong here? Also, blatant sexism right out the gate. What a fun way to start. There also appears to be an immediate identity crisis, as this narration hypes up the show as a prequel about how this motley crew came to be, though the actual content and characters within the show resemble the classic Scooby-Doo gang in almost no way at all. Besides, a pup named Scooby-Doo already beat you to it. That said, there is an appeal to having a more in-depth and mature take on the Scooby-Doo gang and what caused this diverse mix of personalities to end up together. But that's not what this is. As we're about to see, this is just juvenile degeneracy that only exists for the sake of degeneracy, with its ties to the classic ending at the surface level, if even that. We then cut to Daphne's introduction, which is a gratuitous shower scene with several other girls, who are all in high school. So yeah, we're just gonna skip around this. They try to do a meta commentary thing about how pilot episodes have a lot of nudity because sex sells, but needless to say, the makes the self-aware humor fall flat. Suddenly Velma shows up and hits Daphne with a stick, for some reason. She also wears a disguise which she immediately removes, so her motivation here is a tad confusing to say the least. It seems like she's legitimately trying to kill Daphne here, but then just resorts to petty arguments and more meta commentary on TV writing.
You almost killed me! Guess I didn't try hard enough.
Seriously, what is going on? This is Velma's first on-screen appearance, but it seems completely random. Why did you hit Daphne with a stick? Why did you wear a 2-second disguise? I get that these two apparently don't like each other, but Velma never does anything like this again after this moment.
And how do you feel about race-blind casting, Daphne?
Well, as an Asian woman, I think it's cool. I mean, not to oversimplify a thorny issue, but everyone loves it when white people play Jesus or a professional boxer. Why can't it ever go the other way, right?
The ratio of meta commentary to actual dialogue is already very skewed in the former's direction, as it feels like the writers just recorded their own meetings instead of doing any actual work. Any real dialogue within this argument doesn't even have any substance, as they just say mean things to each other with no apparent reason as to why. But then it gets suddenly interrupted when Velma discovers a dead body in her locker. She makes a bad joke, the title appears, then we see her getting questioned by Daphne's lesbian detective mothers. They apparently know Velma well and have a long history. So the origin for how this group came together starts with these two already knowing each other.
You must have a goddamn IQ of 160!
It's established here that Velma's mom went missing years ago, and these two are doing a terrible job at finding her, so much so that they don't even remember her name. They realize how bad they are at their jobs, so they blackmail Velma into helping them, since the murder victim fell out of her locker, making her the #1 suspect. However, Velma is reluctant to solve this mystery because it's revealed that solving mysteries is what caused her mother to disappear in the first place. So now whenever she tries to solve mysteries, she gets terrifying hallucinations.
Lame, 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 lame!
The show tries to be funny with how cliche it is, but as we've established with She-Hulk, being aware of your bad writing doesn't justify it. Velma Dinkley, the woman known for her love of solving mysteries, apparently started out hating mystery solving because doing so lost her parent. That is the most basic, low-effort crap you could pull in making an origin story.
You killed my father.
You killed my father.
You killed my father!
You killed my father!
How do we make an origin for a well-known character? Well, what else except make them hate the thing that they're supposed to like because it lost them a parent? It's almost as bad as Cruella de Vil's obsession with Dalmatians, resulting from Dalmatians pushing her mom off a cliff when she was a child. Okay, maybe it's not that bad, but you get my point. When questioned about what she was doing at the time the body was found, Velma says that she was waiting for the other girls to shower first because she doesn't like them, but that's not what happened at all. You weren't waiting for anything. You came in with a disguise and hit Daphne with a stick. Anyway, upon leaving the police station, Velma gets bumped into by Fred, and before we even get into Fred's character, it should be noted that Glenn Howerton's talent is criminally wasted in this show. The Golden God deserves better.
It's just that it was my idea, Dennis. It's sort of like the jean shorts, you know, where you...
Look at me when you're talking to me!
Oh, shit.
The stakes are here.
In this scene, it's established that Velma finds Fred attractive, but Fred barely knows who Velma is because he is a stereotypical rich kid and sees Velma as beneath him. He is basically an even less talented Jake Paul, who's only really in the story to be the butt of many racially motivated jokes. It's also established that Fred and Daphne are dating, and she constantly peer pressures Fred into sleeping with her, even though he's not ready. This is a good time to remind you that these characters are meant to be 15 years old. We then cut to Velma, at home, yelling at her dad because she doesn't like the way he eats french fries. Her dad is supposedly a lawyer, but apparently he's not a very good one, because Velma implies that they are extremely poor. Her dad criticizes her for being weird and not having friends. She retorts by criticizing him for moving on from his missing wife, and having a baby with the owner of a malt shop that all the cool kids hang out at. This transitions to the dad giving said owner a nude photo shoot. Not kidding. And the scene ends with her apparently forcing Velma to get a job as a waitress. We then cut to the previously mentioned malt shop, where the wake of the murder victim is being held. This segment actually has some mildly amusing jokes.
That is what made Brenda so special. She was the rare slut that did not deserve to be murdered.
But this bit would be more enjoyable if it was surrounded by a better show. Daphne then exposes to the public that Velma is the primary suspect of the murder, which she learned from her lesbian detective mothers. Velma then quits her job, which we only see her working for literally 15 seconds. The only reason she got this random job was so that she could be present at the wake scene, just so she could immediately storm out. Great setup and payoff there, truly subversive. In the back alley, Velma gets swarmed by a sea of cockroaches, so she tries to get back inside, but then the cockroaches just disperse and the show moves on. So, what was the point of that? My only guess is that we were setting up a red herring to make you think she was hallucinating, but the execution of said maneuver was just dull and confusing. Suddenly, Fred jumps out from behind a dumpster and accidentally knocks Velma's glasses off. But then she just immediately puts them back on with no issue. It's not even played for laughs. Blink and you'll miss it. So what that tells us is that this show was never intended to resemble the classic Scooby-Doo at all. The writer is just using the Scooby-Doo brand as a platform to make a show about herself. Anyhow, Fred vents to Velma for some reason, because he's upset that the murder keeps making him cry, and crying is not manly. As vapid as this struggle might be, it could serve as an opportunity to give Fred more depth, since despite being a spoiled rich kid, he would still have a lot of empathy for others. Unfortunately, that's not what we get here, because instead, Velma immediately hijacks the conversation and makes it about herself. And we get a montage of all the fun she had with her mother. We learn that Velma solved the mystery of where her Christmas presents were hidden and felt bad for ruining the holiday, so her mom left to buy her a bonus gift, but that's when she disappeared. As a result, Velma blames her mom's disappearance on her desire to solve mysteries. After telling her story, Fred says this.
Wow, after hearing that, I not only feel emotionally hooked, I understand the stakes of your journey.
I suppose it makes sense for characters within the show to complement their own writing, since no one else is going to do it. Suddenly, a car approaches, which scares off Fred, because the scene just requires him to be gone. Then out from the car appears... Norville. Apparently the show's writers were decent enough to spare Shaggy and Scooby from getting dragged into this disaster, so instead, we get this living embodiment of sloppy seconds. Norville here is apparently an obsessive simp for Velma, though that's this show's greatest mystery, because it is hard to imagine anyone finding her appealing in any way. But now that all our main characters are present, let's examine the clever origin for how this whimsical group came together. They all knew each other before the show even started. Velma and Daphne were childhood friends. Daphne is dating Fred. Velma has a crush on Fred, and Norville is him for Velma. Maybe in the next decade we'll get an origin story for this origin story.
You didn't answer my VMs. Voicemails. Because I still don't know if you listened to my VMs. Voicemails. Though I left you some other VMs. Voicemails.
I know what VMs are!
How do you do, fellow kids?
Norville apparently left Velma VMs about who the murderer is, but he doesn't actually know, so how funny is that? Thankfully, he does have an actual lead, since he believes the murderer was a drug dealer who got caught on camera by the victim. Velma then jumps to the conclusion that the culprit is the malt shop owner, since she recently did a photo shoot with a new camera that her family can't afford. Norville also breaks the fourth wall to renounce drugs.
I think it has something to do with drugs, which I hate.
Wow, such subversion. That thing someone was known for is no longer a thing. By the way, as we move through each scene, it's safe for you to assume that there are a plethora of bad jokes in each one that we just won't cover, because they rapid fire those things out non-stop, and this review needs to get done in a timely manner.
I could maybe help?
Oh, okay, phew. I thought you were, like, suggesting a date.
A date? You wish. A date? What?
We then watch as Velma easily grabs the camera and looks through it to realize there are no pictures of murders. Could those photos have simply been deleted? Well, that would be the logical follow-up, and we don't do that here. Apparently, even if she does a bad job at solving mysteries, her hallucinations still occur, as she gets one that nearly causes a heart attack. Thankfully, the malt shop owner resuscitates her, and is surprisingly kind and helpful towards Velma despite being hated and accused of murder by her. Velma's dad then admits to her that her mother didn't disappear, she left them. Velma goes into denial, but then she realizes all her previous happy memories with her mom were just her being a terrible child. This leads her to somehow not feel guilty about her mom anymore, which seems like it would be the opposite conclusion one would reach here. She then eats a french fry out of the trash. Why? As if we needed more reasons to dislike this character, and she apparently does this a lot.
I saw you eat a fry out of the vacuum cleaner last week, so spare me, I've had a long day.
She then decides to move on from her trauma and fit in at school by dressing up like a
Dirty whore.
By dressing this way, she apparently wins everyone over and she immediately becomes popular. So, maybe in California, where everything is fake, this would be considered viable, but that's not how it works in the rest of the world. However, her popularity is short-lived because another girl reminds everyone that she is a prime suspect for murder. She then gets hazed by everyone until Fred steps in to help her. Someone throws a paper cutter at her, but he catches it and throws it back, cutting some random kid's leg off in the process. Why did they feel the need to put that in the show? Not sure, but it's just as gross and depraved as everything else we see in the show, so I guess it fits in. Fred then makes a vapid speech where he pretty much just calls Velma a scared little boy who just wants friends, and this somehow stops everyone from hating her. I understand what they're going for with the humor, but the connecting dots that are meant to tie the plot together at this point are so jumbled that this show has just been reduced to things happening with no logic or reason. Velma learns that her mom left her. As a result, she decides to dress up at school. Then everyone loves her, then they hate her, then they don't hate her, then it resets as if nothing happened. This feels like it was written by a defunct AI that was told to make the most cliche woke remake of Scooby-Doo as possible. There are small tidbits that faintly resemble what you were going for, but everything else in between is just abject nonsense. Daphne and the other popular girls then confront Velma in the bathroom because they think that she is trying to steal Fred from her. It's all wasteful nonsense, but it ends with such deliberate exposition that it's hard to tell if it's a bad joke or bad writing.
Anyway, Fred's so self-conscious about his body, he kicks everyone out of the bathroom at Spooner's Malt Shop when he has to use it. So have fun with that.
Regardless, Velma now suspects Fred as the murderer because he likes to be alone in the bathroom, with the logic being that the victim might have taken a picture of Fred in the bathroom and he killed her for it. Why would he do something so extreme for something so relatively tame? Because that's how the white man do.
Why would Fred kill Brenda just because she photographed him in the bathroom?
Why wouldn't he? If I were a rich white dude, I'd kill everybody just to get away with it.
I've seen a lot of people complain on social media that Fred only exists to be a punching bag, but while I agree with that, I don't think they go far enough. Everyone in this show is a punching bag. Everyone is a mean, unlikable idiot. The entire atmosphere throughout is just a mix of pathetic aggression. Some of you out there may rebuke against this by saying, oh, plenty of shows do that, and people love them for it. South Park has been making fun of everyone for 30 years. And yes, you would be right about that, but there is a difference. Shows like South Park use the various people and problems in the world to fuel its humor. This show uses humor to fuel political talking points. One makes fun of everyone to be funny, the other makes fun of everyone because the writers want to send a message. Velma sneaks into Fred's home to find pictures of him in the bathroom that another girl took. Like I said, things just happen now. Speaking of, Velma gets yet another hallucination. To try and help her, Norville confesses his love for her, but Velma thinks he's joking and her laughter is what saves her. Velma then tracks down the correct camera, but Fred catches her and explains that he hasn't gone through puberty yet because he's so pampered and spoiled. He's ashamed of this secret, which is why he didn't want to be photographed by the murder victim. Then he says this.
It's okay. I'm just gonna do to you what I did to Brenda.
However, before anything happens, Daphne's lesbian detective mothers appear out of nowhere to shoot Fred in the legs. Why? Because they just so happened to be nearby and thought Velma was a package thief. As Fred falls to the ground, a checkbook falls out of his pocket, as he was about to pay Velma off to keep his secret intact, just as he did with the murder victim. Are we following along? I wonder if the people writing the show are aware that they are just as pampered and out of touch as Fred is, if not more. This is meant to be a show for adults, but the nuance of this show is about as dynamic as a calculator. Nobody would ever pay someone off in such a creepy manner. That is just their incredibly lame duck way of making us think that he might be the killer for 0.5 seconds before revealing that he's not. It's not clever, it's not a red herring, it's not subversive, it is a waste of time. And how did we get here? Fred likes privacy in the bathroom and is white. Therefore, he must be a murderer. Therefore, I must check his house for the victim's evidence. It's actually there, even though it could be easily wiped out. Fred admits his secret when he has no reason to do so. He acts like a murderer, but is not. Suddenly, lesbian detectives. Speaking of, these lesbian detective mothers just intruded this home and shot a minor in the legs for reaching for a checkbook and dragged him off to jail with no justifiable reason. I'm pretty sure their lives should be over for doing such a thing, especially since they did this to the son of a billionaire. Some of you out there might be thinking that I'm being too critical since this is just a cartoon, but this show is being made by adults for adults. So how about we just start taking our jobs a little bit more seriously?
Man, if I found humor attractive, I would be all over you right now. Oh well.
Are we laughing yet? Did you laugh at that? Wasn't that so funny? We then see Velma dig in the trash some more to fetch her mother's last gift, since she now apparently believes that her mother disappeared again, for some reason. Then the show ends with Norville discovering a second murder victim, and thus the first level of hell has finally been endured. So, why all the hype and hubbub surrounding this show? Why don't we just ignore it and let it die a quiet death like every other Rancid show that's come and gone? Well, it's because this isn't just a bad show. It's a show that goes out of its way to corrupt something that was perfectly innocent, in the most vile and disgusting ways. This is Velma we're talking about, and Daphne, and Fred Jones. They were never mean or nasty. They were wholesome and kind to each other, and they were each talented and charming in their own unique ways. It's not that our society worships Scooby-Doo so much that we can't stand to see it tainted. It's simply that they took something inoffensive and appreciated and unapologetically sodomized it. Watching this show is like watching someone kick a puppy until it learns to fear humans. It's just a sad thing to do, and there's nothing good that'll come from it. That's not to say an adult Scooby-Doo show would never work. I happen to think that there would be a great market for such a thing. However, just because a cartoon is being made for adults doesn't mean it needs to be as vile and grotesque as possible, though a lot of creators seem to think that way. All you'd have to do is make largely the same show, but just take off the kid gloves, put some genuine horror and crime in their mysteries, and play up all the unspoken jokes, such as Scooby snacks being enjoyed for more than just their flavor, but still keep the spirit of the original alive, with 5 genuine friends using their best qualities to solve mysteries in entertaining, humorous, and clever manners. Another benefit would be to take the show's writing to the next level, as you wouldn't have to dumb it down for younger audiences, which is like the exact opposite of what they did here. Instead of having a high school idiot fest starring Mindy, it would be fascinating to have each character start isolated, with the exception of Shaggy and Scooby. And yes, you should include Shaggy and Scooby, but give them each anthological origins that all revolve around a single mystery that they are each uniquely connected to. Then, as the story goes on, have them gradually cross paths more and more until they realize that their individual talents work best when paired up as a team. Also, start them off in college if you're going to make an adult show. Honestly, what the hell, people? To paint a better picture of what I mean, let's look at Samurai Jack as an example. Samurai Jack is a Cartoon Network show that had 4 seasons in the early 2000s before getting cancelled. Then it received a proper final season 20 years later on Adult Swim. The show is about a good-natured samurai who gets trapped in an apocalyptic future and has to find a way back to the past in order to kill the demon that caused everything in the first place. With each episode having him take on some robotic threat the demon conjured up to stop him, the show actually remains largely the same as it jumps from CN to Adult Swim. Only now, the creatives have realized that their audience has grown up, so now they can take things to the next level. Instead of simple episodic fights with robots, Jack takes on deadlier, more human threats in more brutal battles, as well as having a more nuanced show that carries continuity and progression as it goes on. And a higher production value is also a nice bonus. Jack doesn't devolve into some wretched deviant that twerks and eats garbage. Who he was is largely still intact, only elevated to appeal to a more mature audience. Jack's final season does have its flaws, but it still serves as an excellent template for other shows to follow if they're ready to go down this path. If only. Unfortunately, instead we get 2 seasons worth of this depravity to sift through. Sorry I'm late to the party, but we're here now. See you in episode 2.